All right, we're going to go through this, and this will be a little different now. We'll have some life application things to talk to you about in a couple of seconds here. These last 4 or 5 chapters of Judges are just a sad culmination of things that are happening here. I mean, there's a decline into total idolatry, and then also there is the Shiloh is the area where they had set up the tabernacle, and it had been set up there. The Ark of the Covenant is there, and that's the religious center of the nation in the Promised Land. But around this territory, in the nation of Benjamin, in the tribe of Benjamin, there was this, what was it? There was this, the moral decay was so evident here. And then we have this tragic story in 18, 19, 20, and 21 of how one tribe of Israel is almost exterminated. So you begin going in, crossing the Jordan with Joshua, and the idea is to drive the tribes out, exterminate the tribes that are possessing the land because God said to. And then you have, in the end of Judges, you have a situation where a tribe in Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, is reduced to 600 men. 600 men total. That's what happens. And those men are spared by the mercy of the army. They could have wiped those men out. The way the story sets up itself is there is a Levite. Levites were responsible for the Ark of God, for the tabernacle. They're responsible for the worship that was supposed to be taking place in Israel. They're responsible for keeping Israel in tune with their king from heaven. But the Levite is living as the rest of the nation. He has a secondary wife. And the secondary wife decides to play the harlot on him and cheat on him and run away from him. But he's not giving up so easily. He goes after her and actually finds her at her father's house and goes and finds her there and decides to be merciful, bring her back. It's okay, all is forgiven, come back with me. And so he brings her back, and he's bringing her back, and then he spends the night in the city of Benjamin. And in that city of Benjamin, a group of, an immoral gang comes and seeks to have relations, not with the woman, but seeks to have a sexual adventure with the man that came into the city. An old man takes him into his house, and what the Levite does is brings out his concubine, his secondary wife, brings her out and says, you can do whatever you want with her. And so they abuse her all night, and she dies on the doorstep. And that's the way the members of this city, the men of this city, do that. And so now we get another very graphic description. He comes out in the morning, she's dead, they're laying with her hands on the doorstep, and he says, get up. She doesn't get up. Get up. She doesn't get up. She's dead. So he puts her on his donkey, goes back home, and then we have another very graphic description. He takes the woman and divides her into pieces and sends her throughout of Israel. He sends a piece of his secondary wife to each tribe in Israel and said, I was in a city of Benjamin. This is what happened. What are we going to do about it? And, you get a chunk of woman and you get a note, and it's like it stirred all of Israel, like there's something wrong with us. There was like this immediate reaction, like this, and it's not a godly reaction. It's like there's something wrong with us. We got to do something about this. So, an army, 60,000 some odd men come to surround Benjamin, and they make a very simple plea. All right, we know this happened in the city. We have evidence. Just send the guys out that did it, and everything will be fine. But Benjamin decided, the warriors of Benjamin decided that they weren't going to do that. No one's going to tell us what to do. We like being this way. And so a war ensued. And then eventually what happened is the tribe of Benjamin was reduced to 600 men. 600 men were and what happens is they're making wild oaths and everything like that. No one is going to take any one of the daughters of, Benjamin, and no one is going to give their daughter to anyone in Benjamin. And we're just going to, by the time this was all over, it was like, okay, they have this war, they have this wipeout, there's 600 men left, and it's like, what did we just do? We just made like oaths to God that we can't give our daughters to these men. And now, if we don't find women for them, then this whole tribe is going to be wiped out. It's like, we can't have this. We can't have like a tribe of Israel being exterminated. So they go and they invade. They find out that there was a city that did not send any warriors. So one city did not participate in any of this. So now they get the grand idea. Okay, there's a city up here that didn't participate in the battle. What we'll do is we'll go up and kill all the guys there, and then we'll bring back the women for the 600 guys in Benjamin. This is like the mind of people. Okay, so they go and do that, but they're still short. Like, they didn't find enough women to do that. They didn't find enough women. They didn't find enough women for these 600 men. So there's still a few men without wives. And it's like, we can't give the wives, we can't give. So then they have another idea. Okay, they bring the guys that don't have, okay, we understand that you guys really need wives. You need to have families. We want Benjamin to come back. We want the tribe to be restored. And so we got this plan, okay? Now, we can't give our daughters to you, but we're having a big festival. It's like, and the ladies, they like to dance. The virgins, they like to dance. And, they're going to drink a little. They're going to celebrate a little, and then they're going to come dancing down this road. Now, on each side of this road, there's the grain, and it's tall. So what you guys will do is you'll hide in the grain. The ladies will come dancing down, and you'll just go out and you'll take them. And then we will let you marry them, because we did not give them to you. You took them for yourselves. And so we will be true to our oath to God, but you will have wives. What do you think? And that was the plan. And isn't that like, this is the screwy end to the book of this, this is the way the book of Judges ends. They said, wait in the vineyards, watch, and just when the daughters come out, the daughters of Shiloh, okay? There's a festival around the temple. There's a festival around the tabernacle, and when the daughters of Shiloh come dancing out, when they're feeling good and they're not noticing, you come out, grab them, and take them for your wives. And we'll be true to our oaths, and you'll have wives. Everyone will be happy. It's like, because in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So, that's the way things ended with that. And so this book was written, to show, people were questioning, how is it that we have King David? Why is it good for us to have King David? Well, tell you a few stories about how things used to be, in these days. And so what is the key to Israel's failure, and why did this wind up this way? Why did you have this, you're supposed to exterminate the people of the land. You almost lost one of your tribes. Why did it happen? They did not drive out the inhabitants of the land, those verses in the first part of Judges. So incomplete victories lead to defeat and subjection. So here's the next part. Okay, now we'll go this way. Now, as people, as we read this, what do we need to know? All right? Now, as these books progress, because there's a lot of strange pieces of this, how do we put this together? I'm going to put this together for you this way and under 4 headings here. And this is the first one. What do we need to know? All right. A nation decays or deteriorates progressively. It doesn't happen bang overnight. So the first is idolatry, religious apostasy. That's the first manifestation. And then when there's trouble in the church or trouble in the temple or the tabernacle area, there's political instability. And when there's trouble in both of those parts, then there's social chaos. So we see through the book of Judges that the apostasy, the idolatry, led people away, the stability of the country not ruled properly, and then in the end you have people making up things. Like they're just making up things. We got a city up there, they didn't send any warriors, let's go kill all their guys and we'll bring their women down here for these. Oh, not enough. Let's let the dancing ladies come out and they can grab a wife for themselves. But we will be true to like the tradition and the things that we said. So it's like very superstitious, very carnal, very worldly. Social chaos, they don't know what to do. Okay, what do we need to know? Trouble in the nation has a cause, the idolatry. It has a course, the progression, and then a curse. And so what are the marks of this trouble? There's a blindness to the things of God, that's first. There's folly in the government and immorality. So we have these 5 groups of people that we relate to: peers and politicians and priests. Those are the 3 kinds of people that we relate to. In that, peers and politicians and priests, in every kind of social setting, you have that now. All right? But the big marks of trouble, first, blindness to the things of God, the government, but peers, politicians, and priests, and then the need for prophets and poets. This is what God is going to show us. This is what, in here we have, God is going to show us coming up in the book of Samuel and through the reigns of David and through the prophets. The peers, the politicians, and the priests, when they are not living for God, well, we'll move on here. I'll show you. Let's see. Peers, these are our age group. These are the people in our society. These are the people, the pressure. These are the people that we listen to. We want to impress them. You want to be like them. We want them to like us. And that's one part of it. Politicians are necessary. It's part of human government. There's 2 things that they're necessary for: protection and policies. Like you need to know how to get a marriage license. You need to know how to get a driver's license. You need police because people are wicked. You need that kind of order. The trouble begins in the political situation when you start asking for this other P, provide for us. Provide for us. All right? This is the basis of the socialist communist system, which has fallen apart. Like the government will provide. Yes, government necessary, protection, policies, but provisions. When you have provide provisions, then there comes a point where there's just not enough to provide for everyone. It just doesn't have. And the big, whatever, that's a whole economics lesson. I can't give it to you. But when they start printing more money and then there's inflation and blah, 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 it happens. All right? And then there's priests. These are the people who are supposed to speak to us about God. They're supposed to sing to us, and they're supposed to pray for us and with us. So these 3 people, these 3 groups of people are going to be in our lives. We have these kinds of people. People like that. People who maybe not serving as, God calls us believer priests, but you have people in your life who speak to you the right way. They sing to you, and they also pray with you and for you. So those kind of people are in your lives. You have these kind of people in your lives. But the last one, 2, that we need to know is about the prophets. This is what God is saying. You need those who tell the truth. You need poets. You need those who frame the truth in a way that we can sing and remember. They're necessary. Prophets and poets are necessary. They hear things before we do. They put things into a form that can help us remember. Prophets and poets. Peers, politicians, priests, always going to be with us. You're always going to have that slightly spiritual person, more spiritual person. You go to them. They're necessary. But then there's this other category of people, prophets and poets. And these 2 people, they bring reason and rhyme and sense and sensibility. It's like that's what they bring to our lives. Like, why should you serve God? This is why, and this is the story. And I'll put it into a form that you can understand. Proverbs, Psalms, the epistles. Proverbs, Psalms, the epistles. You have prophets telling you like it is, and you have them putting into poetic form, like not necessarily roses are red, violets are blue, but in the other kind of form, the kind of rhyme that comes from realities, like if you do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. Hebrew poetry is conceptual. the rhyme that you get, the consistency, and you do this, and that's what we have. And pastor teachers are men who carry out these roles in our church life. So these 5 P's are going to be with us all the time. Peers, politicians, we can't get away from them. Sorry. Can't even watch a football game without seeing 67 messages about politicians, or question 7, whatever it is, right there. And I want anyone, any of the Bible college guys, if you're going out tonight, you get an automatic A if you go and you take down the question 7 sign that was on our property yesterday, if it's still there. So I want you to take it captive, tear it apart, do something with it. Does it vote for question 7, like more casinos in Maryland? It's on our property. So I saw it up there the other day. Maybe it's gone already. Maybe one of you already did it. But if they show up, treat it ruthlessly. Tear it apart. It's not supposed to be on our property anyway. So anyway, sorry. Huh?
Bring you back to evidence.
Yeah, autograph it or something like that. Just bring me a piece, whatever. You can burn the edges,
Do we get extra credit for other properties too?
Oh, well, I can't speak to that. I just, All right, next. Okay, why? All right, so what do we need to know? Why do we need to know that? Okay. Why do we need to know that? Because there is an administration of God in every situation. I use the word punishment. Maybe that's too strong. I would say chastening. Maybe that would be a better word to use than punishment. But consequences lead to chastening. Like ignore the truth and you suffer the consequences, and that you punish yourself. Mercy, God will give mercy. God gives deliverance. So, if we don't listen to the poets and the prophets, then there is, the administration of God is based on poets, prophets, and poets. It's like that's the kind God is trying to point that out. David is the poet king, the sweet psalmist of Israel. And so all of these books are leading up to his administration. That's what's happening here. So, why do we need to know? 2 important lessons from the scriptures. Proverbs 14, the righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And Psalm 103, verse 6, the Lord executes righteousness and judgment for all that are oppressed. So that's why we need to know what we see in Judges. We need to know these realities, because these are important verses. Righteousness is what exalts a nation. What's the problem with the nation? We can talk all we want about government situations, this party, this candidate, that party, that candidate, but really the issue in any people group is the righteousness that's there. If there is a righteousness from God, it's going to exalt the nation. A nation is going to be stabilized by there was a Frenchman that came to America and he saw the pulpits. He said, as long as America's pulpits are on fire, then America will be okay. When America's pulpits cease being on fire, then that'll be the day the trouble happens. And he understood that was the moral basis of the society, was what people were learning from the scriptures week after week after week. And he had seen what happened in France with its revolution, and then he came to America and he wondered why the French, smart people, very smart people, very religious people in France. How come? And what was the difference? The pulpits. He found that there was one difference. The Puritan, the Puritan, Presbyterian, Methodist, mindset, the pulpits that had set themselves up in the United States were the reason that there was a righteousness here, and there was a reason why this democracy took hold, and the kind of democracy that was tried to be established in France did not take hold. And, it didn't really take hold until after the late 60s. If you go through history, you'll find out that France really didn't settle itself as a real, living, thriving democracy until after their Nazi occupation and until after they had a general rule France until the early 1970s, Charles de Gaulle. They really didn't have we think France has always been a democracy. They haven't been a democracy as long as America has been a true democracy. So they've only been a democracy since 1970. That's only 40 years ago. America's been a functioning democracy 232 years. So, okay, next. All right, where we go? Come on. All right, so what do we need to do? All right, now these are the things, this is a practical application for us. All right. Understand and discern apostasy. Can you see it? Can I see it? Can I see it in my own life? Can I see it in the life of the people I'm with? Now, how do I handle that? Falling away begins with compromise. So that's the first thing. Like, you compromise on little things and something happens. Toleration can lead to deception, and things are out of harmony with God's holiness. So what do we need to do? I guess is what do we need? The first thing is understand. Our understanding of the Bible will teach us what's real and right. We'll listen to the prophets. The poetry will sink deep into our hearts. We'll understand the Proverbs, the Psalms, the epistles. We'll understand that, and that will be a great basis for how our life should operate and how our churches should operate, and then how we operate in the community. So there is like a justice that comes to our society because we are just. Like, we keep thinking, that's the big thing that I've noticed that's happened in the last couple of years, in the last 20 years since I got out of college. Maybe, how long is that? 32 years, sorry. Okay, so the last 31 years since I got, the difference is that, used to be that, the church would, bring the justice to the society. And, the civil rights movement in the United States, it was started in the southern churches. You read Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. It is a challenge to all of the religious leaders of the South, white and black, to make sure that you are preaching justice, and that justice, that the kind of enslavement that's happening to certain people, categories of people, is defeated because of the justice. And now it's not that way. Now the justice doesn't come from the church out to the government. Now it's like, well, please, government, just bring justice. So, and that's out of harmony. Okay, what do we need to do? Next thing, refuse to admire the things of the world. That's something we can do. You can see Psalm 73. Read that. Talks about, like, at the beginning of that, Asaph, it's a psalm of Asaph, and he's like wondering why wicked people are so successful. And then right in the middle of the psalm, he changes his mind. He goes to the sanctuary. When I went to the sanctuary of God, then I understood the difference between me and those people. So we refuse to admire the things of the world. We prevent confusion. Prevent confusion. Don't mingle idolatry with the reality of God. That's what's happening at the end of Judges 17 through 21. There's a little bit of idolatry here. There's a little bit of, self-willed religion, the oaths. There's a little bit of righteous, so-called righteous fury. And all of it is it's not like seeking God. And it's like, it's happening, the tragic thing at the end of this is happening right around the tabernacle. Moses taught you how to build this tabernacle. We re-erected it here in the Promised Land. You remember how the glory of God came down when we followed God's plan. And now here all around the tabernacle, we're not operating according to God's design. And so there's a confusion. Like, we think we're doing the right thing. Let's let them catch their wives. Let's let this happen. But, and this last one, what do we need to do? Our crises in life are really crises of the heart, so that are turned away from true Spirit-filled life with God. So we need to have this true Spirit-filled life with God, and then the crises of our hearts will not become crises in our nation, in our communities, in our families, in our churches. All right, last point here. Why do we need to do these things? Well, just study the people in Judges. Why do we need to do this? Study the people in Judges, and we see what happened. Gideon, Deborah, Samson. But social failure is rooted in religious apostasy. And this is the comfort that we take. Why do we need to do these things? Because God will always find the right man and the right woman for the moment. That's the final point of this book for us to understand. God will always find the right person for this moment. And so, we need, why do we need to prevent the confusion? It's because if we don't, then there's going to be social failure. But the good news is we always have to embrace the idea that God always finds the right man and the right woman for the moment. He'll raise that person up. All right? How are you doing? All right? Go back to one right there. Oh, sorry. There we go. So just study. So that's we study the people. We see how God, we see what happens in their lives. And then we see that our faith needs to be, rooted in something strong, rooted in something right. And then that will change, that will control the society that we're in. So, right, so the next book is now we've got, so we understand what lust does to a nation, what selfishness does to a nation, what idolatry does to a nation. Now we come to this place. We have two great stories about, so we have Deborah. This is like the woman's the woman's ministry of the Old Testament. We have Deborah, we have Ruth, we have Hannah. They're all mentioned in 3 successive books of the Bible. So this is the book of Ruth coming up. What is the book of Ruth? I told you earlier that it's a love story, really, but it's got there's a lot of things going on in this. What's the point of the book of Ruth? And I think it's great that the Bible is ordered this way, that we have this 21 chapters of really strange and what is it? Not strange, but this, we just have this record of disaster after disaster after disaster. And then we finally come to this book and we see, the simple idea of a man and a woman, and how a righteous man meets a righteous woman, even though she's from Moab, she's from another place, how that serves to change the course of the nation of Israel. So this is a story of loyalty. So what's the point in Judges? What's the problem? Everyone is. Yeah, everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. So this is in the middle of this, you're going to have, we hear a lot about Ruth, but you got to understand the other guy, the guy in the story is here's the kind of, you have, I like to think of it this way. All right, we get all these kind of sort of surface kind of media type of heroes throughout Judges, to lack a better word. Who wouldn't want to hear the story of Samson? He'd be all over Inside Edition today. There'd be all kinds of reports on what Samson did today. You'd know everything about Delilah. It's you'd hear a special report, everything. Deborah, that would be she'd be an amazing, example. We'd have all these things, the tragedy of Benjamin and that whole thing, how they figured out the compromises that were made so that Benjamin would not be, And then right after all of this, you get this story of 2 quiet people who just do things the right way. It's they're just committed to something. They're committed to the relationship that's fundamental in society. The fundamental relationship is the relationship of the husband and the wife. Husband and the wife have children. The family unit expands. Grandchildren, cousins, all of that happens, and family units form societies. That's the way God designed things to work. That's the way He did it. And here we have it. So we have purity in a time of immorality. And this is one statement, I think this is J. Vernon McGee that made this statement. Ruth is the lily in the mud pond of Judges. All right? It's a lily. This story happens back in the time of the Midianites, just before Gideon defeats them. So about the time of Gideon, you have this hero, Gideon. Oh, that'd be a great story, wouldn't it? News at 10. Oh, wait a minute. Well, it happened in the middle of the night. Special report. Gideon leads a gang of 300. The Midianites destroy each other. All of that would happen, It'd just be right there, and, news and all that would happen. But here, this quiet little story, it says a lot about, it says, you learn, there's so many lessons to learn from this little 4-chapter book. One, and let's look at it, okay? All right, enough of me talking about it. We'll move on here. All right. Yes?
What's the time frame? Do we have a date for when Moses?
The day, let's see. a date. Let's see. Let me see if I have a date here. Let's see, in that time frame of Midian, in the time frame of, let's see, Midianites. The Midianites are probably about 1300 BC. Probably about that, 1300 BC. Is those dates about there. 1300 BC, we have this. So there's a historical purpose. The very end, we see that, we get the whole story of how Ruth and Boaz got together, and at the very end, we get this lineage of David. So this is the divine origin of David's dynasty on the throne. So that's the historical purpose as it relates to Israel. Now, the doctrinal purpose is this, the idea of someone related, kinsman redeemer, a related redeemer. That's the best. Someone like us to redeem us, okay, in the law. So there's an idea of someone related to you can redeem you, can pay for you, and bring you into their family. Like Ruth was married to Elimelech. Elimelech died in Moab. Naomi was married to, Ruth was married to either Mahlon or Chilion, right? So one of those two. They're the sons of Elimelech and Naomi, and then when they die, there was this principle in Israel: if you're a widow in Israel, that someone related to you would take you into their house and you would become their wife. The idea of someone related to you would redeem you. So this idea of a redeemer like us, related to us, rescuing us, it's a picture of who Christ is. The idea of kinsman redeemer. So there's a doctrinal purpose here. The idea that Jesus had to be related to us in order to satisfy the law. So why did Jesus have to become a man? He had to become like us in order to relate to us, in order to redeem us as the Savior. So, yeah. So here we see there's a picture of Ruth gathering things, and the guy behind her is Boaz. He's like, who is this? Who is this? And she's made a name for herself in the community. All right. So what do we need to know about this story? All right. So the story goes this way, that it's a story of devotion and truthfulness, fidelity, and it sets up the whole idea of Bethlehem. Like the whole Christmas story is based upon what happened with this couple. And so she has like a resolve of her love. She's a Moabitess. And there's a secret in her of being a follower of God. And God never leaves himself without a witness. Now, Elimelech's name has a meaning. It means God is king. God is king. And he marries a woman that means pleasant or pleasure. So that's a whole story. If you're looking for a Bible study, the guy marries Naomi. He marries Naomi, and her name means pleasant or pleasure. And when there is the famine in the land, these people leave the promised land. They leave Israel and go to this other land, Moab, across the river. It's the place across the river or across the sea, across the Dead Sea, into this territory. This is foreigners. They go into a foreign territory to find something to eat. So the famine in their lives, rather than them stay faithful to the promise of God, they moved across this, and then the two sons of Elimelech and Naomi found Orpah, not Oprah, but it's Ophrah or something like that, Orpah, and Ruth, and they married that. And something that Naomi had taught these two women sunk into Ruth's heart. She had known about the gods of Moab. The god of Moab is that god that we saw the picture of last week, the god Chemosh, the god that they offered children to, this idol. And something about the God of Israel appealed to Ruth. She listened to the stories. She listened to what her mother-in-law had said about it, and she refused to leave. After her husband is dead, when Naomi is thinking about going back to her country, she says, I'm a bitter woman. I'm going back to my nation. I'm going back to my country. There's a lesson here for us, like, how do we deal with bitter people? How do we deal with bitter people when they're in our lives? How do we respond to that? Like, you may have somebody in your life that's been a very godly person for a long time, then all of a sudden something happens in their life and they are like, God hates me. God hates me. Get away from me. You shouldn't listen to what God says. There's nothing but trouble in being and following the God that I know. It's a part of who I am, and I'm going back to my nation. But that, how do you treat a person like that? Like, Ruth decides she wants to go back with her, and then, Naomi tries desperately to get Ruth to stay in her own country. Don't come back with me. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. But Ruth did not believe what Naomi was saying now. It could be that you have a person in your life that's like a very godly person for a while, for a long time, and then they go through like this spin cycle of stupidity, and they're telling you things that you never thought would come out of their mouth. Like, it's just not worth going to church. This whole Christian thing just stinks. You shouldn't be a part of it and everything. And how do you handle a person like that? How do you handle when a person gets bitter? Ruth tells us something about it. Like, Naomi says, I'm not even going to talk to you. Like, Naomi gives her the silent treatment. It's not even really worth talking about God anymore. So she says, you can come with me, but I'm not talking. And they goes all the way. But Ruth doesn't leave. Ruth says, what you're saying now isn't really the truth. What you said before is true. I believe that, and I still believe that, and I'm not going to let go of that. So, all right. So what do we need to know? There's like these historic moments. This is another historic moment of love and fulfillment throughout the Bible. So we have Abraham and Sarah and their faith, Noah and his family and their courage, the parents of Moses and their courage, and the parents of David and their courage. We have all of these, and these are the this group of people, these family of David and their courage. There's a courage that happens to do what is right. So we have these throughout the Bible. So it's interesting that there's always this sort of family relationship that sort of comes into the picture, that God brings into the picture there. Abraham, Sarah, Noah and his family, Moses, David, Mary and Joseph, Zacharias and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph. All these people, we need to know about them, these historic moments. Now, why do we need to know these things? Because God is our only sufficiency. And God uses those who fear and trust Him, and He supplies their wisdom for life. Like, that's why we need to know this. That's why we need to know these people. Like, why is Boaz important? We're going to see it in a second. Why is Boaz important? Why does he become this major figure in Bible truth? This is the turning point. At some point, this is like the king. The idea of King Jesus starts right here. The idea of King Jesus is starting right here, because this man and this woman are going to get together, and they're going to believe. He's going to believe God and follow what he knows about God. He's going to find a woman that comes to him that's from another nation, but she believes in the God of Israel. They're going to get together and they're going to have children, and those children are going to be a part of the family unit of Jesus Christ. So there is a problem. Ruth and her people, like, there's a problem about the Moabites. There's a problem, like, if you go to Deuteronomy 23, you're not supposed to commit any kind of whoredom with the Moabites. It says this in 23 verse 3 to 6. An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread or water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, of Pethor, of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam. And then it says, you shall not seek their peace nor their posterity forever all your days. Then in Numbers 25, verses 1 and 2, it says that, you're not supposed to commit whoredom with the people of Moab. So these people are not supposed to be, Ruth shouldn't be in the picture. It's like Ruth shouldn't be in the picture. But if you go all the way back to the idea of Abraham, you find out, you find some people in the book of Genesis and the book of Exodus. You find Abraham finds Melchizedek. He's a priest there already serving God. And then you have in Moses finds Jethro. He's a priest out in the middle. So there's something, God is always has these people and all these different groups of people who who hear the truth and embrace it, maybe even more than the people who received the truth in the first place. Israel received the truth. Naomi had received the truth. She had spoken the truth, and Ruth received it on a deeper level than even Naomi did apparently. Because when she came back to Israel, she said, "Don't call me pleasant. I'm a bitter person. I'm a bitter person." Well, who's that? Well, that's Ruth. She believes in our God, She came with me because she believes in our God. But I'm a bitter person. But what do you do with that? Ruth just kept following what she had heard before. So it shows us how to deal with bitter people. Don't fall in the ditch with them. Just follow. Ruth figured out, how can I help this woman? It's I know. There's something about Israel that if I go to a field, I can pick up what's left behind. Because the right kind of man will leave his field with something for me, a poor person. So she finds that place, Boaz. There's Boaz. That's Boaz wakes up in the middle of the night. He's at the heap of wheat, and there's a woman at his feet. Wow, that's amazing. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here on the threshing floor. Surprise. And she says, he was a man of the word. He was a man of conviction. He was wealthy. He was wise. He was committed to these principles. And these two passages in Deuteronomy talk about that. If you own fields, don't totally harvest your field. Don't go picking up every little piece. Don't be a miser. Leave some there. And don't, once you've gone over the whole field and you've harvested your field, if there's something left behind, let the poor come into your field and pick it up so that they can live. The poor you will have with you always. This is where this is first stated. Jesus says this, when he's being anointed with oil, and Judas says, "We could have sold this and given it to the poor." Back here in Deuteronomy, the poor you'll have with you always. Will you take care of them? So Boaz is a faithful person. You have Ruth, who's embraced the God of Israel. You have Boaz, who's been following the God of Israel, and they get together. So what do we need to do? All right, what we need to do in understanding this is trust God regardless of our circumstances and remain true to the convictions that the Spirit establishes in our hearts. And even in the midst of untruth, even in the midst of a bitter person, we should be faithful. We should be true. Ruth was true. Even though it wasn't in her family line that she should be true to the God of Israel, she embraced it. She received it. We've embraced something. We've embraced something. We want to keep it. We want to be true in the midst of untruth. We want to be faith in the midst of faithlessness. You're going to be around people like that. It's going to happen. You're going to start a Bible study. There'll be 15 people there. Someone will talk about you, and then you'll have 2. And then maybe those 2 will do something also. But how do you just got to be true in those situations. Maybe in your families, things will happen. Person who used to be a great believer, all of a sudden they don't care anything about it, Next. All right. Why do we need to do this? Because our lives are filled with people like Boaz and Ruth. Some grow up in the faith and struggle to stray through. Others find faith in difficulty and struggle to find more truth. So we're going to have people like this. There's going to be people like this in our lives all the time. So we need to stay true because we're going to find these people. They're going to be there for us. You don't know where you're going to meet them. We're in Essex the other day. I'm going to a bus stop. I meet a girl. I'm with a couple other people where we just walk up to them. And her mom are coming. Her husband's in jail. She's got 5 kids. It's I've made a mess of my life. What do I want to do? It's actually, there is someone who really cares about you. And, within 30 minutes, this woman is praying, and she's just wondering, is God real? And by the end of the conversation, she believed God is real. So we'll see how that goes. But it happens that way. Our lives are filled with people like we could go into a situation, somebody has no idea about who God is, and we give them God, and they believe it, and they grab it. And and for Naomi's sake, it's like it was even, Ruth had an even deeper kind of understanding of who God was and found the right kind of man. Let's see, is that? All right, why do we need to do this? Okay. Faith involves this, an open heart, a personal decision, and that D is just stray there. Sorry, don't look at that. I'm not quite sure why that's there. We'll just cover it over. It's covered by the blood. Personal decision, direct application, and persistent courage. So, Ruth was not really sentimental about who she was as a Moabite. She wasn't really, she knew what that was. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. I'm going to go and be a part of your family. I've listened to what you've said about your God, the God of mercy. I'm going to go and serve that God. Your God is going to be my God. Your people are going to be my people. I would rather be a part of your people. I would rather be that. And so, we develop an attitude of life that's based on the convictions of my heart. That's what happens. And there's the happy ending. There's the happy ending. There's, huh? They all look really happy. Come on, just look at the picture. Just enjoy the picture. Don't try to write so many notes. This is the happy ending. This is the happy end. Just enjoy the painting for a second. There's Ruth and there's Boaz. He's so happy. I can't believe this young woman fell in love with me, of all people. And there's Naomi. She was bitter and old, and now she has a baby who's going to give birth to, she's the great-grandmother. She's now the great-grandmother of David. There's a great-great-grandmother. I think it's great-great-grandmother. And that's, and at the end of Ruth, we get this picture of like David comes out of this family. Okay, so that's a happy ending. You can take a break. We'll come back and we'll have a short, okay, sorry. All right, we'll come back. So there you see the whole thing. The work of faith comes out. Ruth and Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. Our loyalty to God wins victories for his royalty. That's what happens. Loyalty to God brought royalty. All right, so you can take a break, come back in 10 minutes, and we'll have a little short, probably only be about 20 minutes to talk about Hannah, and then we'll be done for tonight. Okay? All right.